Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show that started it all, the franchise player in the long history of the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. This is The Long Road to Ruin, your podcast for all movie franchises, good, bad, and ugly. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified. And joining me tonight, as he does each and every week, except for when one of us goes on a hiatus, here he is, folks, the wordsmith himself, Mr. Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
Hello, everyone. I'm Sean. You're not, and we watched them so you wouldn't have to.
I debated starting just yelling into the microphone, "Listen, all you motherfuckers!" But I figured, if you don't remember the final action sequence of Blade 2, you're probably not going to understand why I'd want to start it that way. Or the Crystal Method. It is the Crystal Method that does the name of the game, right?
Yeah. Although when I think of Blade, I actually remember that very sweet track by New Order that played in the rave scene at the beginning of the first.
No, all I remember, I never, up until we decided to do this franchise, I had actually never seen the first two Blade movies. So over the last couple of days, I've been able to, I watched the first two, and as soon as, in Blade 2, as soon as they start up that final fight sequence with the name of the game, I got very excited. I was like, yeah! And if I ever do my own movie, there has to be a fight sequence, even if it's like a love story, even if someone asks me to shoot The Notebook 2, there's going to be a fight sequence set to the name of the game.
Oh, look at that. We got Metal Mark to listen to some electronica.
Hey, man, I grew up listening to industrial, which is not too far off from electronica. I'm very familiar with the type of music, and I can, depending on the mood and the people I'm with and the place where I'm at, can be persuaded to shake my booty to that type of music.
One of these days, I am so going to get Melissa drunk enough to share some stories about that. I'm sure she's got some.
You don't need to. I can go into the bedroom and she'll just start telling you if she's awake. But let's get into this.
Save that for the overrun. Save that for the overrun. We haven't had a good overrun in a while.
So tonight we are no theme music tonight other than our usual opener. We're just going to get right into this. This is we're looking at some of the off the beaten path comic book franchises. That's the idea here. So, how much further off the beaten path do you go than a comic book character that was developed in 1973, and in the horror side of the Marvel universe, Blade? A character so obscure. How obscure was he? He's so obscure, I didn't realize he was a Marvel comic book character when I was dragged to see Blade Trinity. I just thought we were going to see a Wesley Snipes vampire action movie. So there you go. We are talking the Blade Trilogy tonight, starring tax evader Wesley Snipes. And let me first say, Sean, as we do with all these things, as I said, I had no prior familiarity with this, and we do this from time to time. I'll use the show as a vehicle for me to learn about a new movie franchise that I hadn't had any experience with before. But you seem to know the character, the backstory in the movies compared to me intimately. So why don't you tell us what your connection to the material is and some of the history that brought the movie to the silver screen?
Well, to be quite honest, I can't really say that I have much of a connection as far as having seen the movie in theaters. Point in fact, my first time seeing the movie was when it was one of the first 3 DVDs that I bought when I got my first ever DVD player. Incidentally, the other two were The Score, which happens to be probably my number 2 or 3, depending on which day you ask me, favorite movie of all time, and The One with Jet Li. By mention, my taste sometimes fails me. Getting back to the point, you have to kind of understand the sort of forgotten historical significance of Blade. You see, the 90s, for as promising as they looked in 1989 when Batman absolutely made a crater at the box office, turned out to really be a pretty messy decade for comic book movies. Like I said, we started off strong with Batman closing out the 80s in 1989, being the biggest superhero-based movie since the original Superman and Superman 2. In 1994, we got The Crow, which in addition to being an absolutely superb movie, got that. Made a big old splash at the box office, unfortunately due in no small part to the controversy surrounding the tragic on-set death of Brandon Lee. In fact, not many people from the general public who saw that were all that familiar with the graphic novel by James O'Barr, which is unfortunate because it is absolutely spectacular and a must-read. So right there, you had the first successful comic book movie of the decade, even if it was a bit under the radar as being from a comic. However, after that, we got direct like 1995's Tank Girl. And later in 95, the further signs that Batman was going downhill with Batman Forever. 2 years after Batman Forever in 1997, we got what, all things considered, very nearly should have been a death knell for the entire genre when Batman and Robin farted, stumbled, shit itself, and fell squarely into big screen infamy. Blade came along in 1998, and at this point, there had been a lot of movies that had been in development hell as far as the comic book and superhero genre were concerned. Previously, Roger Corman had famously submitted a hilariously entertaining version of the Fantastic Four, largely in the interest of helping 20th Century Fox keep film rights. God, let's not go over that one again. And various studios had burned through various stars and directors and stories for years trying to get X-Men and Spider-Man movies made. Those, however, would have to wait a few years because in 1998, New Line Cinema debuted a movie about a largely forgotten Marvel character. In fact, little known fact, Blade, as he was originally depicted by writer Mark Wolfman and artist Gene Colan in 1973, was not the daywalker that he was in the original movie. All that he was simply a human who used teakwood knives and an everyman badassness to combat the undead. In fact, it wasn't until Blade became such a huge success at the box office, making $131.2 million worldwide on a $40 million budget, that the comics did something that in modern times they've really only done one other time. They ultimately ended up taking a major character, although, yeah, we're stretching by calling him Major, and adapting his persona in the story from being a mortal man who got his half-vampire abilities from a bite from the vampire villain Morbius into, well, what Wesley Snipes ultimately ended up giving us. And from there, it would be a few years down the road when we would get X-Men and then Spider-Man, and then the entire superhero craze in its first wave would really be off and running. But first, we got this surprise little hit from director Stephen Norrington with stars Wesley Snipes, Donald Logue, and I'm sorry, I kind of blanked for a second, Chris Christopherson and Stephen Dorff.
So one of the things that, like I said, this is the first time I've ever seen Blade. The very first of the trilogy that I saw was Blade Trinity, and again, I knew nothing else about it. So going into the movie,
wait, hang on. You poor bastard! You saw Blade Trinity first?
Yeah, in theaters. I had a bunch of friends who were familiar with Blade, and I went out with them to the movies, and we could have been going to see anything, and I would have gone. Such was my life at the time, and and the only thing I knew about it was because I wasn't really, I'm not a vampire. I'm not a vampire person, and a lot of vampire lore. This is why I didn't get offended by the Twilight series. I don't hold them dear to my heart. So by that token, I'm not interested in going to the movies to see a vampire superhero. But my friends were. My friends were all into it. And my semi-interest in doing this beyond it's a night out of the house with my buddies was Triple H was in it. That was literally my association with this movie was, oh, this is the one that Triple H is in. Okay, sure. So,
just think, folks, and even after knowing that Blade Trinity exists, they still paid the chaperone.
Yes. So so with that said, sorry, I'm distracted by my cat trying to eat my fish. Maud, get down. Maud, get down. Maud is quickly becoming a star of this podcast and many others. You don't know about that. That happened on the Casual Heroes podcast where in the middle of discussing wrestling, I screamed at my cat. In any case, back to Blade. So my first impression of these Blade movies was, these are sort of schlocky action movies. It actually reminded me in look and in feel of some of the later the zombie movies that were based after a game. The one with the redhead chick. That's the one. It reminded me in look and feel. Blade Trinity reminded me of look and feel and tenor of the later Resident Evil movies. Just very stylized.
Which I hate to say is pretty accurate.
It's just stylized ass kickery for the sake of ass kickery, and everyone's a ninja, which I want to talk about with the second movie. Everyone's a ninja. It's just a lot of kung fu dressed up as, post-apocalyptic noir. So it was like, all right, whatever. So much to my surprise, I watched this first movie, Blade, and the first thing I noticed is how gritty it's shot. It's Blade, the first movie, really, and it came out in 1998, August 21st, 1998. Killed at the box office. I made it for $40 million, did 131, so big success. And I know, and it's shot with that sort of grainy lens. The action is somewhat stylized, but it made sense in the context of the film, and it felt like movies that were shot like in the 70s in New York City. It just had a real grit feel to it. The woman that they got to play the semi-love interest, Mbushe Wright, as Dr. Karen Jensen. On the one hand, she's pretty much used exclusively to for plot dumps. I remember watching the movie and there was this line in my head from the Great Muppet Caper. Miss Piggy says to whoever she says it to, she's like, "Why are you telling me all this?" And the character goes, "It's plot exposition. It has to go somewhere anyway." And as I'm watching the movie, that's what that reminded me of. Like every time she shows up in the movie, it's so that they can give you history on the vampires and Blade and and other stuff. But by the same token, she's a good character in her own right. I don't have a major problem with her. But back to the look and feel of it, Blade doesn't necessarily come across as Superman in the first one. And the violence doesn't necessarily seem as sharp and choreographed and directed as the next 2, and especially the third one, will end up being. I really enjoyed the first one. I felt like it was an interesting story. I enjoyed the motivation by the main antagonist, the baddie, Stephen Dorff as Deacon Frost. This idea that vampires are living in sort of it would not necessarily at peace with the humans, but sort of an armistice, sort of a ceasefire. And they loathe to give that up. And Stephen Dorff says, "Why? We are the top of the food chain. Why not assert ourselves as the master race?" And there's that conflict internally within the vampires, and then obviously with Blade himself. And then and Blade's got his own stuff going on, where he there's that aspect of self-loathing. He doesn't want to be a vampire, but when offered the opportunity to possibly give it up, he doesn't want to give up all the good parts that go with it because he's on a mission, and that would make his life exponentially harder. So, there's a lot of stuff going on with this for a comic book, vampire movie that I really enjoyed. You want to jump in here, Sean? I don't necessarily have a question for you, but what did you? I guess I do. What did you think of how it was shot and the look of this thing?
Well, before that, there's one other thing that I think we need to point out, and that's the fact that this is one of the movies I would point out in terms of how I like to see vampires portrayed in my movies. The vampires are not sympathetic. Blade isn't really sympathetic. For God's sake, in one scene, we see him flat out, straight up rob people. Rob a vampire or familiar, I believe, that he's just beaten to a pulp and then just shrug it off by telling the Boucher Wright, "We're not exactly the March of Dimes."
Oh, I love that line.
Yeah.
It's just like, "Oh, you're going to rob me too?" He's like, "How do you think we fund this operation? This ain't the March of Dimes."
Yeah, he makes absolutely no bones about it. And to be perfectly honest with you, this is the kind of role that Wesley Snipes is absolutely perfect for, is characters that you're not necessarily supposed to like. I mean, you can be impressed with them, you can be in awe of them, you can even be entertained by them. But chances are they're going to be dickbags.
It does bring up the subject of Wesley Snipes' performance in this, in that he plays the character at times very, very monotone and very serious, almost monk-like. There's a lot of odes to sort of stereotypical samurai, and then occasionally he says something to the effect of, almost as if Vince McMahon produced this thing and said, "Hey, he can't sound like that all the time. You have to remind the audience he's occasionally black." So he says things like, "Are you serious, motherfucker?" Or, in Blade 3 has a really funny line. The guy's like, "I can't tell you, they'll kill me." He's like, "I'm gonna kill you, motherfucker."
You know what? For more than one reason, nobody is ever going to mistake Wesley Snipes for Patrick Stewart. But every now and then, he just, and you can chalk this up equally perhaps to Stephen Norrington's direction, David Goyer perhaps for a change having just the right filter on his scripts. We'll get to you in a minute, David. And the fact that when he does, sometimes in a movie when he just doesn't have that much to do, it just somehow comes across that much better when Wesley just knows how to time just the slightest, smallest, most innocuous little line. Like, I love the little fist pump that he gives when he staples Quinn to the wall during the rave fight, and then just says, Quinn, I'm getting a little tired of cutting you up. Like you said, motherfucker, are you serious? And then later, just quite possibly, maybe the very best part of the entire movie is when, spoilers, Deacon Frost has finally managed to summon La Magra, and Blade thinks he's struck a killing blow, and he just instantly regenerates the arm in a liquid morphing effect. He just silently, as the camera zooms in on him, just mouths, "What the fuck?" And you know, he's complimented so well by Stephen Dorff, who's got this kind of Dennis Leary-like chip on his shoulder and snide smugness about him, and Donald Logue, who is just the man is like the Tabasco sauce, the sriracha sauce of movies. He somehow makes everything he's in just that much better.
Yeah,
but the best part of all is the fact.
Hang on a second. Wesley Snipes' portrayal of Blade could have risen to the level of like a blaxploitation type of character, but he, you know, to Wesley Snipes' credit, yes, he's no Patrick Stewart, but to his credit, he knew when to dial it back and you know, and not leap off the screen and be, you know, fucking Truck Turner. Some shit.
It's very easy to forget you're watching Willie Mays Hayes.
Yeah, and I think that's to the success of the performance and the actor and the director. That, you know.
Well, but the real beauty of this movie is, and you can chalk this up in part to it coming out, I think, at just the right time, when the entertainment world as a whole was really embracing the anti-hero. When really white hats were seriously out of fashion, because this was just a movie.
Well, to put it in wrestling parlance, 1998 was the beginning of the Austin era, and really when the Attitude Era.
Exactly.
Second year.
Well, yeah, precisely. And in this movie, what you really got is you got bad battling worse. You got a desperate situation that humanity is, as a whole, completely oblivious to, and how it's about to erupt in a mushroom cloud of fuck right off right before their eyes. And to combat that, yeah, you need a bad man. And it's really not even a matter so much of Blade really having warm, fuzzy bunny feelings for humankind. It's a matter of him just having a serious axe to grind with vampires as a whole. But at the same time, in the midst of all this, it's interesting because another guy that I don't think gets quite enough credit in this whole series for how he brings this additional element to it is Chris Christopherson, who, in his few scenes that he's in, and again, you know, nobody is ever going to mistake his performance of Whistler for being King Lear or Don Corleone or Forrest Gump or Tim Robbins in The Shawshank Redemption or any other really deeply written and realized character. But still, he does this nice job of taking this, you know, force of destruction that is Blade and kind of reining him in, giving him some direction, keeping him on the right track, and keeping him from just exploding completely off the rails to the point that even this cause of his just kind of burns up everything around him.
Yeah, there's a great line in the comic book, The Indestructible Hulk, you know, where Banner says to Maria Hill, you know, the Hulk is an atom bomb, but in the right hand you can use the atom bomb to hit the right target.
Right,
you know,
exactly.
And where it needs to go.
Right, exactly. But most importantly, though, is, again, you have a movie, and it seems unthinkable now, in which they were doing vampires, but they weren't trying to do the Anne Rice thing with them.
Right.
The vampires are monsters. They're not noble, navel-gazing, existential creatures. They want one thing, and that is a snack. As I believe it was Spike once said in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, to them, humans are Happy Meals with legs. That's about all it amounts to. And the closest you really get to them having any conscience about what they're doing is that when it comes to Deacon Frost, it's probably equal parts they're not believing that he could really pull off what he was attempting, or that what he believed in was even a thing, was even a possibility, but also having the idea of this guy, if we took his leash off, would take things way too far. Even we are a little concerned about you and don't want you running things. So there is nobody sympathetic. There is nobody quiet and mumbly and sparkly here. None of that shit. Just vampires are evil, evil things that will fucking eat you. That's all there is to it. And the only way we're going to be saved from him is if we let this stone-faced badass with a sword carve them up like prime rib. Oh,
by the same token, I like the idea.
By the way, if after he saves your life, he happens to tell you, run them jewels and hand over your wallet, hand it over. Because samurai sword.
What I was going to say is, by the same token, I like the idea of humans as familiars, and they're treated as pets and all of this. And, the hope is that if they're good and they do right by the vampires, that the vampires will turn them, and that and the idea that in this world, someone would want to be a vampire, knowingly want to be a vampire. It's real funny. I think I told the story on the show before, but I think it works well here. If I haven't, I called on the subject of Twilight once again. I called into the Mike. It was not Mike Gallagher. I called into one of the conservative radio show hosts, and I was trying to. It's sometimes they'll keep you on there a little bit longer, and you can actually sound like you're an intelligent human being. Other times you get a couple of seconds and they cut you off and you sound like an idiot, like I did. But I was trying to get across that that in terms of Twilight, number one, yes, there are people that would actually want to be a vampire. But more to the point that I was getting across to him was, the women. The reason why women are attracted to that movie is they want to be someone's singular, world. They want to be someone's focus, the way that the characters are in Twilight. But what came across all that he heard was people want to be vampires, and he was like, nobody wants to be a vampire. That's not true. Just as people want to live in Middle Earth, or people want to live in the Marvel universe, or people want to live, in all these fantasy places, so there are segments of the population that want to be vampires. For a while, and I don't know if this is still going on, but there was a subculture among kids and teenagers where they were calling themselves vampires. Do you remember this at all?
Oh God, they made high school fun.
Yeah, they were wearing fake teeth, and they were drinking quote unquote blood, but the blood was something else. And for all intents and purposes, they were calling themselves vampires. So to say no one wants to be a vampire, I think, is to ignore a segment of the culture that is just broken. But my point is, there is definitely a connection in the human psyche to whatever it is vampires represent. People really are attracted to the idea, whether it's the immortality or the sensualness of biting the neck, and the blood, or who knows what. The fact that a lot of vampires now are portrayed as having superpowers. There's just something about it that people are attracted to, and it makes for great movies. If you're into that sort of thing, I much prefer monsters to vampires, but that's a whole other discussion. You brought up Chris Christopherson as Whistler, and again, his character, he's there to be sort of the grizzled old man. He's there to be Yoda, but he's also there to be a plot dump. I said, in Bush Wright's character is pretty much there to receive plot. He's there to give plot, because Wesley Snipes isn't giving plot. He's there to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and in most scenes he is all out of bubblegum. And Stephen Dorff he's not one for monologues in this movie. He has a bit in the beginning and then towards the end, but in the middle, it's just stuff is happening, and you're spending a lot of that time with Wesley Snipes and Bushy Wright. So he doesn't really.
You know what?
He doesn't.
Speaking of Blade and Deacon Frost, it's time for one of my little segments of almost casting. Yeah. Because believe it or not, Wesley Snipes was not the only one that was in the running to play Blade. If you can imagine this, we almost got either Lawrence Fishburne or Denzel Washington. They were also in the running, even though Snipes was apparently always Goyer's first choice. However, I've got to say, folks, don't get me wrong, I love Stephen Dorff, but we got hosed when it comes to Deacon Frost. Because we almost got Wesley Snipes versus Jet Li.
Wow.
Take a moment. Take a moment. Sip that. Roll it around on your palate a little bit. Think about what we could have goddamn gotten. Had Jet Li not chosen to instead do Lethal Weapon 4.
I'm more picturing Blade as Wesley as Denzel Washington, and it's only
okay,
Denzel Washington character from Training Day.
Here's another one. 6 years earlier, when Marvel Studios was first trying to develop the film, LL Cool J wanted the lead.
He's too pretty for that role. I mean, Wesley Snipes has a hard edge to him, and this is people are going to hear this and go like, oh, it's kind of racist, but it's not. It's a matter of aesthetics. Wesley Snipes is a very, very dark man. He is a very there are shades of black, and he is on the darker end. What's his face? LL Cool J is more on the lighter end. LL Cool J, while he's been in action films, still comes across as likable. He has LL Cool J, for all of his muscles, has still like a softer edge to him. I remember as a kid, I was a fan of LL Cool J. I had Radio. I had I'm Bad or Bad or whatever the name of the album was. I had everything right up. Like the first Walking Like a Panther, and then I moved and started listening to white people music. But I remember even as a kid, LL Cool J just seemed very accessible. Wesley Snipes looked like he could be a vampire killer. Wesley Snipes looks like a fucking badass, and just based on aesthetics, if I put Wesley Snipes, across from LL Cool J, Wesley Snipes looks like he just tears heart out, a la Temple of Doom. So
well, yeah, because at that end of the pigment spectrum, about the only people you've got occupying that space are like Wesley Snipes and Eddie and Charlie Murphy. That's about it.
And the back
and regarding LL Cool J, I mean, by that time, yeah, he had started off as a really straight up, pretty street rapper. But then he had that bit in the mid-'90s where he kind of started going more of the grown-ass man, smoothed out R&B seductive route. And once you go that way, it's a pretty tough sell to go back. Because I remember a few years later he tried to do kind of a little more of a raw rap album called GOAT, Greatest of All Time, and it was so forced. It was so obvious how hard he was trying to get back to looking and sounding hard again, and nobody was buying it. And there's no way if they had made this in 1992, anybody would have been buying him in this kind of role. But then again, I think you and I both have to admit that for as much as he has his faults a lot of times, this is one time when David Goyer really got the story right. And matching him up with Wesley Snipes in the lead was was just an ideal match, even though, God, I'm still salivating over the fact that we almost got Jet Li. I can't let that go.
I know that you're all hot and bothered by it, but honestly, Jet Li doesn't really do it for me like he does it for, you and many others.
We almost got Blade versus Yulaw.
Okay.
He's somebody's bitch.
In any case, this first going with Blade. I never really got you to talk about your opinion about the look of it, because we've been talking more about the performances. But it's if you look at sort of the modern superhero movies, one of the reasons why people liked the new Captain America one was it was grittier than some of the other comic book movies that are out there. So when you look at Blade, Blade, you would never think that you could get from Blade to the Avengers with the way that it looks. You wouldn't, unless you did the research, you wouldn't have even known it was a comic book movie. It really comes across very well. It takes itself serious enough without going overboard. I really did enjoy the story. Though my one complaint about it is I feel like two complaints, and they kind of go hand in hand. It's more of a Venn diagram of issues. The ending takes forever. When Blade finally, the whole third act seems like it just drags. And from Blade, and then part of the reason why it drags, and they could have cut this entire bit out, and it would have made for, I think, a tighter movie. I get your opinion on this. The whole issue with the mother. She's supposed to have died in childbirth, and as it turns out, she shows up at the end of the movie as the bad guy. She's there for the purposes of manipulating Blade, and she's a vampire now. And it's one of those moments in the movie where he lets his guard down, and they're able to take him prisoner, and then they use his blood to resurrect Lamagra. He's saved by Dr. Karen. What the hell's her name again? Right? Dr. Karen Jensen. Her real name is right. So he's saved by Jensen, Blade, who has been fighting the thirst, ends up having to drink her blood in order to regenerate and get his strength back, and then attack the bad guys, which is all well and good. And I'm fine with them capturing him. I'm fine with them using him to bring Lamagra back, but it should have been. There was a lot of walking around, talking, waiting for things to happen that could have gotten cut. And then there's that Oedipus scene with him and the mom, who look like, there's got to be like Blade porn out there where he has sex with his mother, because that's where it looked like it was going. And never mind my psychosexual issues, I just didn't think it had any business in the film. I didn't think where it added anything. I didn't think the performances were as such where, like, oh, well, you would have missed out on a really fun thing there. Kind of reminds me of our conversation about, Ripley and her daughter. This feels like the argument that you and Jason has said is that we don't need Ripley and her daughter. Or whatever, would have made the movie way too long and would have thrown in the shit we didn't need. Well, if this is any indication of what happens when you start throwing in shit that's unnecessary, I'll take your word for it, because this felt unnecessary. This laden the movie too heavy with performances and scenes that just didn't add anything to the movie. And then, like I said, then it makes the run. This is a 2-hour movie. You cut that. You cut most of that ending. You're down to about 90 minutes, and that felt more right for this movie. What are your thoughts about what I'm saying about the mother and the overall way the third act was executed?
Well, first things first, as far as the actual look of the movie goes, yeah, spot on, because all credit to Stephen Norrington. Number one, he knows how to really carry across the movie being dark and shadowy and grim while still allowing you to see everything that he wants you to see. And along those lines, he takes a lot of very fast-paced, impressive action. And he knows how to shoot it. He knows how to frame it so you can see everything. You can always see what's going on. And he really gets the most out of Wesley Snipes being a very accomplished, lifelong martial artist who just comes across with such a presence on screen in this role from top to bottom. And really, I agree with you about the third act. I think that Sanaa Lathan as Blade's mother is the only performance that doesn't really add anything at all when she's on screen. All she is just a device. She's just something that's in Deacon Frost's belt and something that happens to Blade. That's all.
Really quick, the conservative radio show I called into was Michael Medved. The Michael Medved Show. Please continue.
Okay. Noted.
That out there. The mother was a device they could have easily replaced with the doctor.
Well, yeah, she could have, because throughout the entire movie, Blade is never really all that hung up on what happened to her. It's really not that big a deal to him. He just kind of keeps going forward, and he's not all mopey or conflicted. It's not like he's got a whole Bruce Wayne thing going on about it. Just, okay, Mom's gone. Not that I should need an excuse to kill vampires with a fuck-off sword, but, okay, whatevs. And then just all of a sudden, there she is, and he just crumbled, and I guess some attempt to add some fucking meaning to the fact that she's on the scene, because she damn sure doesn't. She damn sure means about fuck all else. And ultimately, she just kind of ends up being dispatched with extreme prejudice and no reluctance whatsoever. Just like every other vampire in the movie. That's all she is. She's just kind of more meat that's on the conveyor belt running toward the saw blade.
Yeah, it was like as the script was being developed, it was as if somebody said, "We need a shock here. We need some sort of a surprise." I know we'll have his mother show up as a vampire, and it'll mess them all up, and that'll be great. And then, like, I could see where somebody would say that, and it might have even been true, except that in execution, it's one of those where, during the editing process, they should have looked at the dailies and said, "This was a good idea on paper. However, it's not a good idea in practice. Let's cut this whole scene."
Well, and again, it adds nothing, because throughout the entire movie, we're already so invested in the father-son relationship that he's already got with Whistler. So who gives a shit about his dead mom? Blade clearly doesn't. It really drags that third act of the movie pointlessly. One more thing I want to add, and I wish I had gotten to this earlier when I was on the subject, so I wouldn't be quite so tangential. Andrew Graham, one of our new bloggers over at Radulich and Broadcasting.blogger.com, piped up with a comment on the Facebook page. Said, "First fight scene is likely one of the best of the series and best character intros you could ask for." A motherfucking man. Absolutely. You cannot do any better than when Blade storms the bloodbath at the rave.
Yeah, that entire sequence is really good. Who's the comedian that she walked in there? Because he looked familiar. I couldn't place his face, and I just didn't go back and look. But he looked. I feel like I've seen him somewhere before.
The comedian. You mean the actor who plays the supposed first victim?
Yeah. He's somebody.
Well, I don't know who he is. I don't really see him listed on Wikipedia anywhere. However, it's worth noting that the fetching young lass who is with him is Tracy Lords in one of the best performances ever turned in with her clothes intact.
At this point, I'd like to direct everyone to her life's work, where she does, in fact, keep most of her clothing on, and that is her techno-industrial band, the Lords of Acid. Some of the best music I've ever listened to, not played with a guitar. Really
well,
is.
Which is again, also, well, and hell, even in the case of that one, it's worth noting that their hallmark song is, I believe, Pussy Control.
There's a couple of good ones there, but it doesn't identify who the young man is. So I'm not gonna agonize over this. Someone listening will be like, hey, it's this guy. But in any case, the opening fight scene, the whole, even before he gets there, I love the idea of her leading him into this sort of secret underground club, and then suddenly there's this change, and blood starts raining down from the sprinkler system, and everyone's really into it, and the guy's like, I don't know about this. Yes, I was up for whatever happens after the girl handed me the Bud Light, but I don't know about this much. And have you seen those commercials?
Oh, yeah. I see those stupid things on YouTube all the time. I can't watch them. Yeah, I just forgot what reason YouTube has decided that I can't watch a Markiplier Let's Play without trying to foist mainstream American pissvasser down my throat.
Just every time the woman says, are you up for whatever happens next, I want the guy to wake up, I want the screen to go dark and the guy wakes up pantsless with his ass bleeding, somewhere out in the desert. In any case, nothing? All right, moving on. Well, you said you were up for whatever happens next. In any case, and then they pan with the camera and you see the banner that says Bloodbath, and the guy still doesn't know what he's in for. He has no clue. He's just starting to freak out. And he tries to leave, and and he gets punched in the face, and then everyone's just hissing at him. It's really great. I enjoyed that whole opening sequence, and it was certainly a signifier of what was to come. I want to move on to Blade 2 and then Blade 3. We've got about 40 minutes left of the show before we hit the overrun. So anything left unsaid about the first movie? Anything that was worth talking about? Before you say, here's the one thing I think is worth mentioning. Every one of these movies deals with how do you kill a vampire. I liked the fact they kept this simple. Very matter of fact. Silver kills him, garlic kills him, sunlight kills them. We weaponize these things in order to slay vampires by and large, and the only thing that's hokey religion nonsense is crosses. And they kept it with that, and they didn't seem to color outside the lines, nor were they inconsistent within their own universe. As near as I could tell, I was fine with all that.
This is flat out some of the most fun you will ever have with a vampire movie, and if for God knows what reason you have never seen it, by all means, go track it down and watch it. It is an example of everything that, when he's on the top of his game, makes Wesley Snipes an absolutely worthwhile, bankable action hero.
So, allegedly, Whistler is killed in the first movie. As it turns out, he's actually turned into a vampire. You're left with the idea that he was turning into a vampire and then he shot himself. But as it would be foretold, he actually did not kill himself. He was a vampire in some form. He lives. It's just, I don't know quite how he got there, but he lives. And Blade 2 opens with Wesley Snipes in Europe on the hunt for his friend Whistler, just to save him from a life of being a vampire. And from that point on, the movie gets turned on its head as Blade is recruited to lead, quote unquote, the Blood Pack, to kill a mutation of the vampires called Reapers, who are everyone they bite turns into a Reaper, and they are feeding on vampires and turning them into Reapers. So there's, by what would appear to be the father of the vampires, who isn't Dracula, which I thought was a weird thing. There's an interest in getting Blade to call a truce and help vampires kill Reapers. That's the movie. And then there's a big twist at the end where the FBI didn't know that the CIA was setting them up, and we go from there. So, Blade 2. That's directed by Guillermo del Toro. A different look.
I'm sorry, it's my natural reaction to Guillermo del Toro movies. Yay!
Okay. Different looking movie than the first one. Well, the first one was something of a 70s noir vampire killer superhero movie. This one seemed to float more in the direction of horror fantasy, stylized kung fu movie.
Oh, you can watch this movie and get a pretty good feel for where Hellboy Through the Golden Army came from.
Yeah, I think that's actually my first complaint about this. That's actually my first complaint about this movie. It's not a bad movie. Not by any. It's an interesting movie. It's one of those where first time I watched it, I was exhausted, so I kept passing out, and I'd wake up, and I'd wake up when the sound changed in the movie, and I said, "Fuck this! Let me start all over again because I'm missing too much and I'm not understanding what's happening." And I went back and I rewatched it.
How could it be bad? Because hey, look, kids, it's Norman Reedus.
I went back and I rewatched it. I'm like, this is actually really good.
Free Multi Scowly Zombie Hour.
But one of the things that I was complaining about, and as much as I said, any fight scene that starts with with the name of the game is an awesome fight scene in my book. The road to getting to that particular fight scene, everyone is a goddamn ninja in this movie. Unnecessarily. The first one didn't seem like that. The first one, it felt like he was the ninja and everybody else was just trying to defend themselves. And even at the beginning of this, where he's fighting the guys on the motorbikes and, he gets the one guy that he lets live because he needs information. Okay, I was good with all that. I'm good with the two vampires sneaking into his hideout who are supposed to be trained. Okay, I'm good with that too. But along the way, all the fighting that takes place over the course of the second act are not trained fighters. Why is everyone fighting like a ninja?
Actually, it's funny you point that out because Andrew Graham just piped up again. It says, and I quote, "I like Blade 2, but I have two issues. The unnecessary CGI fight sequences and the fact that we never got Blade versus Donnie freaking Yen. They did seem to pull in a lot of pro wrestling moves in fights." Oh,
I mean, this to me, with all the wire work that they do in this movie, this could have been Crouching Tiger, Hidden Blade. I mean, to the point where it got annoying.
Oh, Andrew, don't you dare start with that they got the pro wrestling in my Blade movie yet. We know what awaits you. But no, I get it with the unnecessary CGI fights. That was a big plus of the first movie, is the fact that it was much more practical, much more hardware, with really not very much CGI at all. But then again, as you pointed out, the first one was more akin to kind of an all-or-nothing 70s blaxploitation style. It was a smaller scale of fight and something a little more grounded, because that was what Blade was battling. It was him versus vampires at the street level right up until the final fight with La Magra, which, by the way, if you've ever seen the Blade Special Edition DVD and you've seen the alternate, really ridiculous ending, in which instead of Blade versus Steven Dorff, we get Blade versus a big CGI pillar of blood. Be thankful for what you got at the end there. And yeah, Andrew pipes up. I'm not saying that pro wrestling was bad. I was a fan at the time. It was kind of an odd thing to mix in with the hyper-stylized stuff. And he's right. Because that's really not Del Toro's specialty. What is his specialty is everything else. Is the way that he blends in characters with really fantastic monsters that he's able to bring to life so effectively. And the way that he paces his story, and the fact that, oh my God, I just realized it's Guillermo del Toro directing Ron Perlman. Huh.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I love that.
The obligatory, hey, it's a Guillermo del Toro movie. Ron Perlman's in all of his stuff.
Well, I didn't realize what I was watching for a second time.
Consideration between the Hobbits.
Well, I also didn't realize until watching this for this review that was Norman Reedus playing Scud. Like I was trying to say before, before the mopey, scowly zombie hour. I'm sorry, folks. Uncle Sean is not the biggest fan of The Walking Dead. Go ahead, come at me, bros. Do it. Not the TV series anyway. Love the comics, love the video games. But even he's kind of entertaining because he sort of offsets Whistler with his sort of scuzzy youth and his needing kind of everything to be huge and big and hip and edgy, and Whistler is so uncomplicated. So,
well, I have to give them credit. That character could have really been that character type can be exceedingly annoying, and they managed to avoid making him a caricature of that type of character. Like he doesn't like when he dies. I'm like, oh, that's sad. I wish I wish you hadn't betrayed your master. I wasn't sitting like we do in most of these movies. Where we're like, good, fuck him. We hate you.
Well, and actually that's kind of the nice thing about this movie, though, is you get some more people for Blade to really play off the whole time. The Blood Pack, they're not big on developed characters, but the ones who are there still kind of manage to somehow be sort of fun to watch. I'm a Ron Perlman fan through and through, so that's obviously just utterly cool as hell to me. I agree with Andrew that Donnie Yen was criminally underused. You also got the likes of Tony Curran as Priest, Merritt Valley Kyle, I think I pronounced that right, as Verlaine, Matt Scholes as Meat Chupa. Who the fuck comes up with these names? There's a character called Lighthammer.
Yeah, well, he gets killed, so... Actually, I had a real problem with that, with that whole bit there.
Lighthammer. That's...
Well, hang on. This was one of the problems I had with the movie.
That's the name of an equipable Final Fantasy weapon.
All right, settle down. The scene where Warhammer dies, that whole sequence to me made no sense, because here these people 2 years have been training to fight Blade, and then you send the one woman down there with the red hair, who seems more like she's going to a party than she's going to kill monsters. and he dies, and she starts running in fear, and it's like, aren't you a trained soldier? What's wrong with you? It was one of those, like, at least in the movie Aliens, you know, you've got these Marines who are, you know, trained to fight and their heart is steel, and, you know, all I need to know is where they are, you know, and when they actually faced the aliens, they freaked out because they were losing. They didn't freak out because they were there. They didn't even have a chance.
I agree. Please Hammer, Don't Hurt 'Em was not the most effective cannon fodder. At the very least, we kind of got some trash-talking, one-upmanship interaction between Reinhardt, Perlman, and Blade before things kind of came close between them.
Honestly, the Blood Pack should have been the Marines from Aliens. They should have had Bill Paxton in there, you know, as they're talking about the Reapers, he should have raised his hand and said, you know, how do I get out of this chicken shit outfit? By the way, so I'm at work the other day, and
so you're saying Greg the Hammer Valentine would have been the one saying "Game over, man, game over."
Yes, they should have replaced. They should have replaced. They should have replaced Steel Hammer with Bill Paxton. In any case, I'm at work. And I work with 3 or 4 different nurses in my particular area of the jail, and somebody said something, and it just kind of fed me the line of, you know, like, does anyone have any questions? And I blurted out, yeah, how do I get out of this chicken shit outfit? And everyone just turns around and looks at me, and I'm like, I'm the only one here that saw Aliens. Give me a fucking break. And then everyone looked at me and said, what movie are you talking about?
Damn you, movie, why did you have to make John Henry's hammer a redhead? Why do you not kill the ginger?
In any case, yeah, most of the Blood Pack are completely useless. And, you know, and Ron Perlman's fun, you know, wanting to kill Blade every other 5 minutes and finally turning on him at the end, and, you know, and they have the fight scene. Excuse me. That's all well and good. And like I said, I like the movie. I don't have a lot of major problems with the movie. The stuff that I'm talking about are sort of quibbles, things that didn't necessarily, I think, work. But overall, I thought it was a well-told story until the end. Once again, these movies are they're like, you know, great. We get to the end, oh boy. You know, it's almost as if they don't quite know how to end these things. And so my problem here is you've been set up this whole time, you know, the Reapers are bad, the Reapers are animals, the Reapers are this, the Reapers are that, and suddenly the Reapers are now whispering secrets to Whistler. You know, and then it's revealed that, as indicated from the beginning, that the first chance they could to betray Blade, they would. And as a matter of fact, they were setting Blade up all along. And it's like, oh, for God's sakes. You know, do we not know how to end this movie without there being some massive betrayal? I don't know. What did you think of that? Because I don't know. I kind of just rolled my eyes at it.
Yeah, I do get a little bit of a Sting vibe from Blade at times. I mean, there are times where I think that all we're missing is just Arn Anderson to sneak up with a chair shot to the back, and the depiction will be pretty much complete. Yeah.
Like the father of all vampires should have ripped off a hood and yelled, "It was me, Austin. It was me all along."
You know, and that is one thing that always bugged me a little bit. Is in the first movie, Blade and Whistler demonstrate so much of an understanding of the way the vampires operate, and in fact, it's what's managed to keep them a step ahead. So, how is it that both movies have ended with Blade pretty much getting fucking duped? It's barely less sad than the way somehow moles keep infiltrating CTU right under Jack Bauer's nose.
The other issue with this is, and before I get to it, I have to bring this up. Much like when we talked about Die Hard, there was a movie missing There's a real missing, and I need to know what happened to, at the end of the first movie, the Doctor and him are connected. She's a part of the group. They don't even address the fact that she, like if you want to help come up with a better serum, she's like, oh, I can come up with a cure. She's like, I don't need a cure. What I need to do is a better serum to keep the thirst at bay. And then you never see her again. She's not, like they couldn't bring the actress back or something. But whatever the real issues were with including her in the film, I really felt like they needed to explain like what happened to her. You know what? Look,
I mean, any of our animal friends that are populating Facebook right now and are playing along at home, if you got a bit of trivia about what happened to her there, by all means, let me know, because I couldn't find anything. I mean, I know that there was a scrapped plot element in the first movie that managed to make its way into the third one, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. But I couldn't find anything on what the hell happened to Dr. Jensen. It is a completely scrapped plot element. It's utterly forgotten.
So with her gone now, there's a new semi-love interest, and they don't get all hot and heavy with these anyway. But it would have been nice to see that element of his character, because the only time you saw him softening up was with his mother, and we already discussed how that whole bit was pointless. But it would have been, but this movie he softens up even more, and they introduce this woman who then ends up dying at the end of the movie. But again, it's kind of like unless you really like that character, there's no other emotional connection to it because he's not as connected to her. So it's like, if he doesn't care, why should the audience care? But yet they spend a lot of time with her death. So I don't know, it felt like they were giving notes on the script that says Blade needs a love interest, and it was sort of tacked on the way that it was written. When I felt like if you're gonna do it, then really do it. Give them more time together. Let's have a scene where the old card where we're like, we'll have a life together when this is all over. We can make this work, and then she dies. That would have been great. Take her out almost as soon as Blade finds true love. That I think that would have been just fine. But instead, she kind of goes back and is like, oh, well, I didn't know that this was your plan all along, Father, and you set me up to die too. And then it's like this sort of slow, double cross. I'm like, I don't know about any of this. But other than that, other than some of the issues with the quasi love story, other than the too much stylized kung fu fighting, those are my only quibbles with the movie. Other than that, I thought the story was fun. I really, and I'm not, me, I'm a big scaredy pants. I don't like horror, but I like the look of the Reapers. Definitely reminiscent of the xenomorphs from Aliens, which I liked. In a lot of ways. This movie pulls a lot from Aliens. That's why I keep bringing it up. The way the Reapers moved, the way that their jaws worked, this movie was very inspired by Aliens in look, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the action sequences, and as far as the use of the technology and weapons, although I really wish somebody had said, don't use those kinds of guns, those aren't going to work, and somebody else then yelled out, oh, what are we supposed to use, harsh language? Again.
Well, I mean, memorable creature designs are kind of a staple of Del Toro movies. It's just something that, not that they're unimpressive necessarily, but it's just something that you expect to be a big plus. It's a big part of why his movies are so easy to escape into. And also because, for the most part, he manages to kind of blend he usually blends CGI and live action pretty well. I kind of get what Andrew is talking about, but I think it's not so much that they blend in that, like Jurassic Park, you can't really tell one from the other, but it's the fact that they interact so effectively. I mean, seriously, when you watch this movie, there are portions of it where it really is almost like you can see him kind of working out what would eventually become both Hellboy movies on screen and how he would present them.
Anything else on Blade 2?
No, you know what? I got nothing else. I got nothing else. I think we summed it up. We summed it up pretty well. I still think it's an excellent movie. I'm not going to say it's better than the first one, just that it's very different, but still immensely enjoyable.
Yes, it's the last good Blade movie. Okay, I have to talk about this. We're gonna go right into Blade Trinity here. This is a part of the Blade Trinity conversation. I work with the trio of men who call themselves the Casual Heroes, and they have a website called thecasualheroes.net. And one of these gentlemen, a good friend of mine, in as far as people I've met on the internet and only know as a voice and a picture on Facebook. But we send messages to each other daily. We talk wrestling and whatever else is new in the world. Gavin and I used to do a podcast called The Whiskey Rebellion, which is on indeterminate hiatus for a variety of reasons. But one thing about Gavin I find interesting is that he seems to have a personal philosophy guided by if he believes X to be true, devoid of any other context, then it is true, even when it doesn't make any sense. So, for example, he believes so-and-so is a liar and is always going to be a liar, and I can't remember the woman's name, but he said this on a Casual Heroes podcast when we were talking about Bill Cosby. So despite the mountain of evidence coming out about Bill Cosby being essentially a rapist, he said, I think it was Gloria Allred, because I don't like Gloria Allred, Bill Cosby didn't rape anybody, which is illogical on its face. Here's another example. Something else that he said recently. I'll just go right to what the relevance of this is. Ryan Reynolds is awesome, is his belief. If you add Ryan Reynolds to anything, it immediately makes that thing better. Therefore, Blade Trinity, is the best of all three movies. And he could believe this ironically, but I'm going to go with he truly believes this in his heart of hearts because he called me a bad person for believing otherwise. Here's what I will tell you. Blade Trinity is a stupid movie, but it is at least semi-enjoyable, except for the fact that Ryan Reynolds ruins the fucking movie. This is a Jake Lloyd situation where you could have a good movie. You could have at least an entertaining action movie, which is all this really amounts to. Like, the first two had a point of view and something to say, and there was some grist for the intellectual mill intermittent with all of this other stuff going on. I mean, they're not fucking Schindler's List. I'm not saying that. But at least with Blade 1 and Blade 2, there's something to talk about when it's all over. Blade 3 is an action movie. Like I said, Blade 3 is Resident Evil. It's just, especially some of the sequels, it's just there for people to munch popcorn and watch shit blow up and fight each other. That's it. That's all this movie is. And there's something to be said for how good that can be. However, you have to be careful with it because if you introduce an element like, say, Ryan Reynolds, who the reason why he ruins this movie is because the movie has a tone to it and he's off-key. He's so sarcastic that it takes you out of the fucking movie. And why I brought up the Gavin thing is just because Ryan Reynolds is a cutie doesn't mean his performance is good. Unless you're a woman, and that's how women think. And that's fine, but neither one of us is a woman and neither is Gavin, so I don't understand how you could think that way. Okay? To sum up, Blade Trinity fails because of Ryan Reynolds. That is the biggest problem with this movie, and I don't care how cute he is, that's where I stand. Sean?
My problem with Blade Trinity, my biggest problem with it, is that, and the way into the whole Ryan Reynolds thing, I think he's a guy who is effective in the right roles. I'll even go so far as to say I don't think he really gets quite the credit he deserves for his ability to play a straight man when he really tries. But he's just always most effective when he gets to be, as you put it, kind of sarcastic and lighter-hearted, and even, dare I say, somewhat charming in a way. In this movie, putting him in there as Hannibal King, it's like trying to conduct an appendectomy with a dildo. It's the kind of thing that you look at it and you just want somebody to just retrace their thought process to how they reach the conclusion this would be a good idea and would work out in any way except a messy, unpleasant conclusion.
I don't want to say that I think Ryan Reynolds is a bad actor. As I said, Ryan Reynolds is fine in certain movies. Certain movies I don't think he does as well in. He was great in Waiting. There's another. I think he's in the movie where The Proposal, I think it is, where it's him and what's her face there. Sure. Benjamin says he's stealing your appendectomy line. Hi Ben. Ben Colon, everybody. He does our title. He does our title card art, and on it you can see his website. Check it out. Check out his webcomic. Check out all the things that Ben does. He's a great artist and a great addition to the show. And someday when he gets finished with his dental work, he'll be on to talk about The Crow with us. But we'll get to that later in plugs. Ryan Reynolds is good in many things. He's not a bad actor. I would tell you he's not the worst part of Green Lantern either. That would be the writing. They wrote that part for him. He acted that part. It's not his fault. They they decided that Hal Jordan was actually Ryan Reynolds and Ryan Reynolds is Hal Jordan. But that's a different conversation.
Well, and that's an example of the fact that I think that was a role that he really was more or less right for. It's just that script absolutely, utterly failed him.
Well, okay, now I feel like you're once again you're disagreeing with me, but and then saying the exact same thing I just said. Ryan Reynolds is not the problem with Green Lantern. But again, the point with me bringing this up is it's not that Ryan Reynolds. It's not that Ryan Reynolds is a bad actor. He's just bad in this movie, and he's so bad in this movie that it actually ruins the whole experience to the point where I want someone to do like a phantom edit cut, just cut him out of the movie entirely, and see if this gets any better. Robert Winfrey, host of Everyone Loves the Bad Guy, which is on hiatus, I think, until I think he'll be back in a week or two. And the 401 Ground and Pound radio show. Him and I were talking about this today, and he was saying, Ryan Reynolds ruins the movie and Jessica Biel is pointless, which I disagreed with. Didn't get into it with him at the time, but now is as good a time as any, as we're talking about performances and actors. We'll get into what the purpose of even adding these two people into the movie was, but I actually liked Jessica Biel's character for what it was. Jessica Biel plays Whistler's daughter, who somewhere between Whistler's family dying and him meeting up with Blade, she is born and separated from her father, and she's now a vampire hunter. That's all well and good. Other than
I just hate that we never got to meet Whistler's mother.
Well, cause other than the whole bit where she's making a playlist. I remember watching that in the movie theater and wanting to throw my drink at the screen. I see people doing playlists, or she likes to make it. So let me tell you something. If you have headphones on and you're in the middle of some sort of a fist fight, you're probably going to lose that fist fight. You've decided one of your senses is necessary. So she's in she likes to hear, and just the whole way Ryan Reynolds delivers that line. She's like, trip hop, dark, oh, come on, just stop. I'm a vampire hunter. Everything I listen to has to be gothy. Just please.
The pain. Oh, yeah. God.
You know, at that point, you wanted one of the goth kids from South Park to just sort of dance across the screen, well, with a cigarette. In any case, Jessica Biel. So aside from Jessica Biel and her stupid playlist, I actually thought she did add something to the movie. I thought she played off. She was a good sidekick to Wesley Snipes. I thought she played well off of him. I thought she played well off of Ryan Reynolds too, for that matter. She doesn't have a whole lot to say in the movie, okay. But for what she's supposed to be there for, I thought she was adequate.
There's one thing we have to acknowledge right off the bat, though, when it comes to how frustrating this movie can seem at times, and that is the fact that as an audience, we are probably about as frustrated as everybody else who worked on this movie, because the production difficulties behind this are the stuff of legend.
Oh, do tell. I always enjoy story time with Sean when he talks about how this thing got from green lit to on screen. So hit it.
Oh, am I glad you asked. And a lot of it goes back to the fact that, famously, folks, if you get the impression watching this movie that Wesley Snipes didn't want to be there, you couldn't possibly be more right. From the very beginning, he hated the script. He didn't like David Goyer at all. He didn't want Goyer directing this, despite the fact that he had written all 3 films in the franchise. During filming, the cast and crew have repeatedly said that he would often refuse to shoot scenes, which meant that Goyer often had to settle for stand-ins and computer effects. Patton Oswalt once told a great story that much of the time Wesley would spend most of the shoot getting high in his trailer, that he once became violent with Goyer after some accusations of racism. And it even devolved at one point to the extent that Snipes would only interact with Goyer or even his co-stars either by communicating through his assistant or using Post-it notes. Ryan Reynolds was often referred to as Cracker on multiple occasions. So the end result is what we get is a movie that has been built on the way Wesley Snipes kind of became synonymous with this character through the first 2 movies, and in this, because he just didn't want to play, it mostly just ends up with various scenes of him nodding or grunting or just looking generally irritated. This thing was doomed. In fact, hang on, this is almost like Chuck Norris. I'm sure there are even more stories about this. I'm actually going to go so far as to look up the IMDb page and see what I can find, because I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, and by the way, on a side note, Trinity, I think, is probably about number 5 or 6 on my list of subtitles that I want to go away from movies forever and all the evers.
All right, real quick, while you're gathering up your thoughts to continue telling us about the horror that it was making this movie, let me quick say this about the plot. In the second movie, the big reveal is that they're trying to create daywalkers. That was the whole thing with the Reapers. Is the Reapers were sort of a experiment gone wrong, and they want the vampires to be able to walk around during the day, because it's a huge flaw in the vampire existence that they can only roam the nights. This is a continuation of that theme. We've got more vampires still obsessed with the idea of becoming daywalkers, and in this one, the idea is to wake the original vampire, the first vampire, Dracula, Drake, as he's called in this movie, which every time I hear that, I think of the rapper now. But anyway, because he started at the bottom, now he's here, you see. In any case, that's the plot of this. Is that it starts off with the bad guys awakening the Dracula Drake, and they need to capture Blade in order to do something. But it's him and Drake, and together they'll make Daywalker vampires, and then the vampires can go and rule humanity. That's about the size of it. And somewhere in the middle of this is actually something I want to talk about in a little bit, but there's a plot element of, what would you do if all the humans were gone? How would vampires continue to exist? And the answer is blood farms. Just humans that no one gives a hoot about, trapped in saran wrap, feeding blood, and that's how the vampires would have gone on to exist without actual humans running about. I wish somebody had sat down and maybe you can speak to this, and given the choice of dealing with the Dracula plot line and the plot line about the blood farms, I wish they would have just stuck with the blood farms. That was a far more interesting idea than once again bringing up what amounted to a video game bad guy, a video game boss. But in the midst of all of this, Whistler is once again killed, and that's how Blade ends up with the Night Stalkers, Jessica Biel and Ryan Reynolds. They're essentially the surrogate family. They're the new Whistler for him, and they go about where Wesley Snipes kind of runs them down and says, "Oh, you're a bunch of kids, cranky old vampire hunter is what I am." But they kill some vampires. They go on a few missions, and eventually things start to roll in a direction where they become more of a team. Again, I would have been okay with a lot of that had Ryan Reynolds turned down the snark, and they had just focused on the blood farms and lost the entire Dracula plot line. But your witness, sir. Tell us more about how this piece of garbage got put together.
Okay, I've been sitting here this whole time, and I've been going over the IMDb trivia, and for those of you out there who love so bad they're good movies, you may be familiar with a book that came out called The Disaster Artist. It's by actor Greg Sestero, and it chronicles Tommy Wiseau's making of one of the most famous schlock classics of all time, The Room. There is even, I believe there's also a movie version of this in production. So it's going to be a movie about the making of a horrible movie. In which case, I would like to wonder, where is my lifetime unauthorized original movie that chronicles the making of this piece of shit? Because if so many people hadn't corroborated a lot of this, I wouldn't actually believe it. So I'm just going to go right down the list here and kind of fill up some time by making you all laugh.
Hang on, before you do that, because we are dangerously close to being cut off, tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to do something I wouldn't normally do. I'm going to give us an extra half an hour.
Yay!
I'm going to do the full 2-hour boat here, folks. We've got 30 minutes of live time left, and then we are going to cut the show off. But I'm giving you an extra 30 of live time so we keep the show going and keep the people who have joined us thus far a little bit longer, just a little bit longer. Go.
Okay, so let's start with some more Wesley Snipes trivia, shall we? In this movie, the sum of his lines, including the numerous one-word sentences, comes to 100 sentences. No, actually less. Less than 100 sentences.
And most of them have to be when he meets the Night Stalkers, because he actually goes into a monologue about how they're all not worth shit.
Yeah. And that actually counts, arguably my favorite part of the movie, Blade saving a baby and then just going, Gucci goo. it further corroborates that not only that Wesley became a giant pain in New Line Cinema's ass and would not speak to Goyer or come out of his trailer, but he would only respond to the name Blade. Evidently, Wesley and Chris Christopherson really bonded throughout the making of this trilogy. And they were indeed reportedly pretty unhappy with the movie and not thrilled with David Goyer's script, mostly because they felt that there were too many new characters that were all of a sudden added to the chronology, and they were approaching the point of too many cooks really spoiling the stew. And at one point, it's really funny because I had never noticed. Well, actually, here's another one. Speaking of the added characters, one of Goyer's early ideas was that in addition to adding Hannibal King to the mix, he would also introduce another character from the Tomb of Dracula comics, Rachel Van Helsing. But then when he heard about the movie Van Helsing entering production around the same time, he all of a sudden decided against it and went with making Abigail Whistler up right the fuck out.
Real quick, unfortunately, I waited too long. Not that this matters. We're recording now, essentially. I waited too long to add more time to this, so we are actually now in recorded time instead of live time. So I apologize to people who heard me say, "Hey, we're going to go over," and then we didn't. Blog Talk issues, nothing more I can say about that. But we'll continue to do what we're doing here, and we'll do plugs at the end. So if you've come back and you've heard this message, thank you for coming and downloading the show. Go ahead.
I really kind of feel bad for his co-stars because at one point, I never noticed this before, but there's the line when Blade is deriding the Blood Pack, or the Night Stalkers, rather, and asks if they think of the Vampire Hunt as a sitcom, at which point you have the camera cutting from one actor to another to King of Queens alum Patton Oswalt, former Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place co-star Ryan Reynolds, and Jessica Biel of 7-7 fame. Part of me has to wonder if perhaps that might have been intentional, especially considering that during production, Jessica herself managed to cost the studio over $300,000 by destroying a camera by firing an arrow directly into its lens. Could be Goyer's fault, since he did tell her aim for the camera, although I'm sure he probably meant the plexiglass shield that was in front of it. But somehow or another, Jessica apparently became quite the crack shot with bow and managed to instead hit the small opening right in front of the lens. What else? What else we got here?
I feel bad for the camera guy. He's just sitting there shooting. He's just, he's like, okay, oh fuck,
That is a pooped-up moment. We almost got a very different plot because one of David Goyer's early ideas was to flash the series forward a number of years after the events of Blade 2, in which the vampires had won. Humans enslaved, and Blade is the last hope for humanity, and his slower aging is explained by his being half vampire. They deemed the story too dark and dropped it. Hey, by the way, all of you out there who might have disliked the fact that Triple H had anything to do with this, blame the studio, because initially his role was going to be a lot smaller, but his work ethic and presence so impressed the producers that they managed to extra lines for him.
Well, considering most of them were insults aimed at Ryan Reynolds, who gives a shit?
Yeah. What else? A couple of little tidbits here. Most of the sets as the vampire's high-rise lair might have looked familiar for those who watched Stargate Atlantis. Let's see. I think I'm actually through most of the really good stuff. Oh, instead of Ryan Reynolds, we almost got Colin Farrell as Hannibal King instead.
That would have been infinitely better.
Yeah, it would have been. However, I got to give Reynolds credit because according to this, dude packed on 25 pounds of muscle for this role. Damn, son.
Yeah, my problem isn't with Ryan Reynolds, it's when Ryan Reynolds does bad.
Yeah. I know. I get you. I've done harping on that. And really, these are just a few of them. Just this. Oh, okay. Here we go. One more. We probably would have gotten a completely different movie if this would have worked out, because at one point, Stephen Norrington considered coming back to direct. Then he read the script. Also, even if he hadn't come back, they also offered it to Blade 2's Guillermo del Toro. He passed pretty much the moment Hellboy got the green light. So,
shouldn't that have been a warning to the studio that maybe this is a bad idea and we shouldn't do it? If you offer it to somebody who's a known good director and they go, no thanks, I've read the script, this is dog shit.
You know what it starts reminding me of after a while? You remember when we talked about Predator 2? How they actually offered it to Arnold? And he pretty much said, not just no, hell no.
Kind of the old, what are we doing here? What's this all about, really? What are we thinking about?
But really, I mean, it's not a chicken or the egg thing. You can't really look at it and say, was it bad because of the production difficulties, or did the production difficulties come about because it was a bad idea in the first place? No, this is one where you could agree pretty much unanimously that everything comes back to the fact that this was a terrible script that went way too far off the reservation from everything that made the first two movies work. And that is that they were just flat out brainless action movies. And they went and tried to make this comedy that you would even cast someone like Patton Oswalt in this. And don't get me wrong, folks, I love Pat. But when that's one of your casting choices, you really need to sit down and reassess where you're trying to go. It's too goofy. It's too cutesy the entire time. In that sense, I guess you could even say that Reynolds was the right tool for what was a bad idea in the first place. Because he pretty much carried off just about what the movie envisioned for the character. It's just that what they envisioned for the character was asinine.
Right.
Yeah. And I got to admit, David Goyer is like the Vince Russo of screenwriters. He works when he's got the right filter for his dumb ideas and to latch on to the good ones. And in this case, I would have really rather he made his original idea than what we got instead of trying to rehash that hackneyed make Dracula a vampire god storyline. God.
Yeah. Well, like I said before, they had something really good with the blood thing, but it's one scene. They kind of blow the place up, and then or they have the woman turn everything off. And then they're going to go back to it again because the main thrust of this thing is bringing back stupid Dracula. But I mean, you've already kind of done this, and then again, your whole reason for bringing him back was if you want to do that, that's fine, but you have to have a better reason than we want to create daywalkers. That's what I'm struggling trying to explain the plot, because I'm like, I don't know how. It would have made more sense. We lost the father of the vampires in the last movie. We have no leadership. Where vampires run amok. We need this guy to come back and show us the way. And his thing is, he comes back and he's like, conquer humanity. But we need to get Blade. He's the daywalker, and with him we can make more daywalkers. That I think it would have been a better twist on it. But again, I could have lived without him entirely. And then all he really served, the only purpose he served in the whole movie was so that Blade would have a good boss to fight at the end. Which
and you know what? I'm sorry, I don't know what it is, but I keep coming back to that, and that is the fact that the whole Dracula is a vampire god. It has failed everywhere it's been tried. Most notably, it resulted in one of the very worst episodes out of 7 seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Okay, Robert Winfrey, who was listening at home, he messaged me. He said Jessica Biel plays a great Jessica Biel with approximately one facial expression. That's a little unfair. I'm not saying it's entirely inaccurate. It's just a little unfair.
But on the other hand, she compliments Wesley Snipes very well. Blade brings the whooping, Biel brings the ass. So,
well, again, she's trying to prove herself to her dead father, to this guy. She's. If you listen to her explanation of her origin, she was like, my father tried to keep me out of this, but once I found out who he was and what was going on, I wanted to be a part of it. So, her character is always, is always in the business of trying to prove herself to these other people that she can do this and that she is worthy.
Coming to a theater near you, Blade, daddy issues.
Yeah, well, listen, that's what they gave her to work with, and I thought she pulled it off as well as she could with the material they gave her. It's a lot of qualifiers. That's why I said, a little unfair, not entirely inaccurate. I just, there could have been more there for her. Obviously it would have been a more fleshed out character. But as you're saying, this movie was so riddled with production issues that I'm sure by the end of the day they were just like, just put the tight pants on and shoot arrows for fuck's sake and try not to destroy into the camera. So... honestly, let me talk about Triple H for just 1 second. He does a fine job of playing a dick in this movie with a pet Pomeranian. He seems like the type that would have a pet Pomeranian, by the way. But they basically wanted him to just be a heavy who insults people, and that's what he did. And he does have some very funny lines. At one point, they've got Ryan Reynolds tied up and they're interrogating him. They're using enhanced interrogation techniques, as it were. And Ryan Reynolds keeps saying really sarcastic things, at which point Triple H kicks him in the face and says, "Knock it off, you fruitcake." Which, I love the fact that the line is fruitcake, of all things to call him. So once again, I'm not crying about it. He's there to be a henchman, the main henchman, and he does an adequate job of doing that. Not unlike his heel. It was not unlike his heel persona in the WWE.
Remember, folks, this came before the Chaperone. This happened, and they made the Chaperone anyway.
Right. So, look, I think what we learned from the Blade trilogy is that, 2 great movies and a third one that probably shouldn't have been made. If it was going to have this many problems with it, this many issues with the actors, this many issues with the director and the script, it probably should have just been scrapped and, they should have gone and done something else. and Wesley Snipes should have gone and paid his taxes. Sean, your final words, and then we'll do plugs.
Just watch the first two and forget we ever alleged that this movie happened. That's about the best advice I can give you is, you know what? Treat it like the 8th season of Dexter. Yeah, just do that. It never happened. The story ended in Blade 2 with catching up with that one henchman in the London strip club. That's where the whole thing ended. There, no matter what you hear, no matter what anybody may tell you, ignore any of that silly crap about a Spike TV series starring Michael Jai White. And forget what anybody says about a third movie. There was no third Blade, and they damn sure wouldn't name it something as stupid and hackneyed and cliched as Blade Trinity, the Revenge of the Reloaded Redemption.
Die Harder. All right. So after talking about this, though, at some point we're going to have to do Hellboy. Now I never saw the second one, so now after talking about Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman, I have an urge to do the Hellboy series. But this is what's going on right now. Ben Cologne has requested that we put off doing The Crow, which is what we would have done in 2 weeks. However, we are going to honor his wishes because he does such great work for us. We're putting that off indefinitely. And what I mean by that is we could be doing it as soon as April, but I don't know when Ben is available to do The Crow. So right now, what's on deck is in 2 weeks from today, first, on March 18th, I believe, is when I told everyone we were doing it. March 14th is when the live-action Cinderella movie comes out. March 18th, Robert Winfrey and I will be taking up the mantle of our summer blockbuster series. Summer begins in March, folks. That's how it works. So we will be reviewing the live-action Cinderella movie. In honor of that, and because Ben is not going to be available to do The Crow with us, we're going to put The Crow off, and the next day, on the 19th, we will do our first animated feature. This is the first time, because, I mean, we did the Pixar one. We did, that's CGI. We did Toy Story, not last November, but the November prior to critical acclaim, such as it was. So with this one, this is our first traditional animated trilogy of movies that we're going to be talking about, and why not start with one of the best ones of the Walt Disney animated features, and one of my daughter's favorite movies ever, Cinderella. And what's that you say? You're just going to be talking about one movie? No, we're going to do the whole trilogy. What? Cinderella was a trilogy? Yes, it was, folks. Yes, it was. Because the good people at Walt Disney really know how to squeeze blood from a rock. So there were 2 direct-to-video sequels. I don't remember what the names were, but the second one kind of deals with the further adventures of Cinderella and her evil stepsisters, as one of them tries to find love and Cinderella tries to adapt to castle life. That's more or less the plot for the second one. The third one is a time travel story, interestingly enough.
What?
I'm not even joking about that. Here, I'll quickly give you some. Yeah. Well, essentially what happens is the evil stepmother figures out that if they had stopped the fairy godmother from interfering, none of what happened in Cinderella would have happened. So the evil stepmother sets out to capture the magic wand from the fairy godmother, and she uses it to go back in time to the night that Cinderella met the prince, and what she uses the wand to keep Cinderella trapped in the attic or the tower or whatever. And when they go to slip the shoe on, I think it's Drusilla, she uses the wand to make Drusilla's shoe bigger. So Drusilla is the one that marries the prince, and it goes on from there.
The Doctor would have fixed that shit in 45 minutes without commercials.
I don't watch Doctor Who. Now look, for Robert Winfrey's sake, and for those who are just like, oh Jesus, Mark, what are you making Sean do here? I want you to step up and say that you were enthusiastic about this when I proposed the idea. So Cinderella being on the broadcasting network. I want you to tell people that I've not twisted your arm.
No. I am definitely cool with this. I still love Disney at heart. I cannot force myself to say good things about the direct-to-video sequels, but I certainly love the classic movie. It's obviously outstanding. Huge happy part of my childhood, that, and I'm anxious to get to talk about it because it's interesting to kind of see just how much Walt's direct creative input in the animated classics really sets them apart from every point that Disney just seems to have missed ever since in trying to carry on these legacies afterward. Oh, and I might add, we have also, and I might add...
So that's what we got going on for the next show, is the Cinderella thing. What else you got going on?
Well, I would say go ahead and stay tuned to the Facebook page for more updates on the website. I have finally decided on a host for it, and I'm in the process of getting content migrated over there. I would apologize for how long I've taken, but then again, I also have to remember that at the very least, at the end of the day, I didn't subject our listeners to a bloated, ridiculous crowdfunding campaign that delivered absolutely nothing over the course of 3 years. So there's that. Otherwise, I really got to get some more podcasts going. I keep feeling like I have a void that I've got to fill. I've got a friend of mine who wants me to maybe start contributing to a wrestling podcast sometime in the near future. Robert Winfrey and I have been talking off and on about wanting to do a satirical MMA show that riffs on Skype and Facebook conversations that I can only describe as being like borderline fever dreams. Mark is apparently back from where I don't know, but hi, Mark, welcome back.
Apparently you missed my first message.
Yeah, I must have missed what you said the first time. And God, I keep thinking that I would love to just kind of start a really loose conversational gaming show, maybe based on Skype Hangouts, kind of like some of the podcasts that I've been watching lately during my downtime. In short, somehow, for the first time in my life, I think I actually probably need more things to do. And this is after I just moved. After.
Well, as I said, I do this show every other week. Opposite this one is the Metal Hammer of Doom, and then the only other show that I'm doing weekly is guesting on the Casual Heroes. I'm not really a guest; I'm sort of a permanent panel member of the CasualHeroes.net WrestleCast. That's the CasualHeroes.net. You can hear me talk wrestling and try to read the minds of wrestlers such as Samoa Joe. That was our last show. Our last show, Lilia, was a 20-minute discussion over why Samoa Joe might prefer to work on NXT than go to New Japan. Because I know what the fuck Samoa Joe is thinking. But that's how the show went. Those are always fun discussions. I mean, whether or not it obviously makes more sense if you like wrestling, but even if you don't, it's a fun discussion between us guys. The Metal Hammer of Doom will be back next week, this time Thursday. we don't have an album to review as such. We're going to do some more covers, so that'll be fun. In April, I believe there's a new Nightwish that we'll be doing, and a Prong covers album. So that's what's up in store for April. As far as this show goes, as I said, on the 19th we've got Cinderella. I don't know where we're going to put The Crow back into the calendar. So this is sort of a loose. This is card subject to change, but the next 5 shows after Cinderella, 3 in the month of April, 2 in the month of May, roughly. We've got the Tom Clancy movies, Darkman, Iron Man, and the Highlander movies. Over the course of the summer.
Over, you son of a bitch.
Over the course of the summer and then going into the rest of the year, again, The Crow. We're going to do Mad Max around the time of Fury Road. We're going to be doing the Terminator Trilogy, because I've never heard of a movie called Terminator Salvation. Have you? So we'll be doing the Trilogy around the time of Terminator Genesis. Smokey and the Bandits going to be one of the summer movies. Come October, we're going to our horror franchise we'll be looking at will be Jaws. We'll be looking at The Mighty Ducks, Chronicles of Riddick, and going into the end of the year, roughly, we'll have Sam McCarty on, and we will do the Lord of the Rings trilogy and The Hobbit. And before year's end, we're gonna go back in the Wayback Machine, dig up a George Burns classic, and we're gonna do the Oh God movies. Look them up. One of them is called Oh God, You Devil. And lastly, because we haven't really talked about these kinds of movies, and I feel like we need to do at least one of them, we're going to look at the Porky's franchise. So that is the 2015 calendar right now.
You know what we have to do sometime to kind of get this great idea we had once back on track? We really need to get back to, starting with Batman the Animated Series, back to the DCAU shows. Yeah.
I would even go as far as looking at some of the DC animated movies. They've started this series with the New 52. They're 2 movies into it. A third one's about to come out. Those are great. I've enjoyed the new DC the New 52 DC animated movies, but the ones before the New 52 were also very good. There's a couple of Batman ones that are outstanding. There was a Suicide Squad movie that was good. There was the Dark Knight. The Dark Knight Part 1 and Part 2 were outstanding. So yeah, there's plenty of DC animated movie stuff to do. Obviously, DC animated television shows that are worth looking at. So we'll figure that out as well. You can check out all of our shows on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. You can also, Sean, plug the website.
It is radulichandbroadcasting.blogger.com. Oh wait, I'm sorry.
Blogger or Blogspot?
I always get the platform mixed up. Hang on. I always get Blogger and Blogspot mixed up.
It's Blogspot. I remember when I had a blog, it was Blogspot.
No, yep. You're right. I had it mixed up. It's Blogspot. Blogger is what I go to when I want to add content to the blog. It's very blank right now. I have the blog locked in. I'm mostly working on getting some art to make it all spiffy-fied, for which I may have to eventually swallow my pride and ask Ben if he feels like maybe coming up with a logo. We obviously have bloggers, we have podcasts put up, and I have a bunch of ideas for other stuff that I want to start adding down the road. But just stay tuned to Facebook, and we'll have a lot more updates there as soon as we get more things posted. But otherwise, that's about all the balls I've got in the air right now.
In April, Robert Winfrey and I are going to be reviewing one movie, and that's the new Fast and the Furious. That comes out this April. And then the summer blockbuster series begins in earnest in May. I got my tickets already for the Age of Ultron, which looks awesome sauce. That's right, I said it. So that'll be the second week of May. We'll be reviewing that, and then we'll just keep going with all the movies that are coming out. So with that said, Sean, another great show. Much appreciated, sir. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I hope Ben can do a title card for Cinderella, just because I'm curious to see what he would come up with for that, given the kind of stuff that he's done in the past and the type of cartoon that Cinderella is. I have this feeling that we're going to end up being the mice, and I'm going to be the fat mouse.
Either that or we're going to end up in dresses.
Maybe we'll be mice in dresses. That was in the movie, too. So, with that said, this has been The Long Road to Ruin, a Radulich Broadcasting Network program. For Sean Comer, I am the mandated reporter, Mr. Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Hey, a movie! Yeah, we're gonna be a movie!
Starring everybody
and me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily.
Hey, a movie!
We can watch it all develop.
Starring everybody
and me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear. Come on, join in. We're gonna start